So inside this box, which reads, "With the speed, agility, and spirit of a Puma," I don't know why I couldn't remember that. So courtesy of my friends at Unisport, specifically J Mike, who I do the Boot Nerds podcast with, inside this box, I have a pair of prototype football boots from Puma, specifically some speed boots, something we haven't really seen from the Puma brand since the Evo Speed line was discontinued. And as you can see, they are very different than anything the brand currently has on offer. So while this particular pair isn't going to be releasing to the public, at some point in the near future, hint hint, spring 2020, you will eventually be able to buy these. And for those of you that do a little bit of boot spotting, you would have seen quite a few pros training in what looked to be a blacked out variation of this exact football boot. I even made a video speculating on what they could be, but we don't have to speculate anymore because I have a physical pair in my hand. So even though this is a pre-release prototype, I anticipate that once it does release, which should be hopefully pretty soon, it's going to be very similar, if not identical to this. And I am free to talk about these boots, even though we don't have any official tech specs as of yet. Either way, I'm going to do my best to break down exactly what's going on and give you a little bit of an early look at what is hopefully the future of Puma speed boots, which hint hint, is very, very light. Also, if you guys do end up enjoying this video, please don't forget to support it with a like. And if you are new here watching for the first time and don't want to miss out on weekly videos on everything football boots, make sure you hit that subscribe button. So first things first, I just want to comment on the way that these look, which if I didn't mention it already, this version will not actually be available for sale. And I don't think that these are the retail graphics. So this is kind of a one-off in that regard. Either way, the graphics look quite cool. So if this did end up being the final graphic, I don't think that many people would be mad about it. But the actual silhouette and shape of the boot, it's quite nice. It's obviously very different than anything Puma is currently making. At least that would be my opinion. And it does kind of remind me of like the X16.1, X17.1. Although admittedly, this is a lot more sleek and I guess flowing in terms of its design, both in terms of look as well as how it feels on feet. So it's a nice improvement over those for those that are wondering. Either way, you can see that it reads Ultra along the side in giant letters. Faster. On the very back, you have this equation right here, which is either an equation for speed or the secret formula to ACC technology. I'm not entirely sure. You can see it says speed prototype right here. Loading, which kind of implies that it's coming, but it's not quite there yet. You can see that it does kind of read that it's the fourth variation of their prototype. So I guess it's possible that there is more change to come to this particular boot. And of course, it does say spring 2020, which I think is just a hint at when these will actually be available. There are other little details as well. It does have a wearable sole plate finish with the orange and matte black, which looks quite cool. And then on the heel of the other boot, it says catchable, but it's scratched out, which I guess implies uncatchable. Either way, cool looking boot, cool looking silhouette. I think it's a nice direction for Puma to go into. But that's enough about looks. What about the performance? And we're going to start with the weight because that for me was by far the most noticeable aspect of this boot the instant that I picked them up, because they are so much lighter than any speed boot that is currently available. So I'm going to weigh this pair for you in real time. Keep in mind that this pair is a size 9.5 US, and you can see that they weigh in at 5.9 ounces, the equivalent of 167 grams, which is lighter than any speed boot currently available and puts it in the same weight range as the OG 2010 Adidas F50 Adizero, which is a football boot that pretty much changed football boots for the next 10 years. Speed boots since then have kind of bulked up a little bit, but it looks like Puma is attempting to bring back super lightweight football boots once again. And just for comparison's sake, here's the Nike Mercurial Vapor 13 Elite, which is the most popular speed boot on the market right now. Also one that happens to be quite light. In a size 9.5 US, you can see that they weigh in at 6.8 ounces, the equivalent of 192 grams. An already lightweight boot. These are a full ounce lighter, which, trust me when I say, is very noticeable. And I know what you're thinking. It wasn't that long ago when Puma tried the Evo Speed SL concept, which was a football boot that weighed in and around 100 grams or so, depending on what size they were, but they would only last approximately 10 matches. The durability was obscenely terrible. That is not the case with this boot. In fact, considering how light they are, I was actually very surprised at how solid they feel. That's why the first time that I picked them up, I was very surprised at the weight because the upper feels very structurally sound, and the way that the boot is put together in general, I think makes a lot of sense. So from a durability standpoint, if you were anticipating something like that EvoSpeed SL, that is not the case here. These are football boots that are both very light, but also seem like they are built to last like any normal pair of football boots, so keep that in mind. The upper, however, is a completely new direction than what we've seen in the past from the Puma brand, sort of, because immediately the upper kind of reminded me of the textile base that we originally saw on the Puma V106 back in 2006, for those that can remember that far back. Either way, what you're gonna find for an upper is not so much a knit, more so what I would say is a woven textile material that leaves a lot of exposed, I guess, yarn type material across the top of the foot, but it's also heavily textured. It has a lot of grittiness to it, which means that in terms of grip on the ball, because it does seem to be a slightly harder knit material, it doesn't feel slippery whatsoever. And then of course through the midfoot, you have a lot of kind of a thin polyurethane top layer acting as a protective surface, if you will. But again, these aren't the retail graphics, so if they're not gonna have all of these graphics here, there wouldn't necessarily need to be all of this extra material. So we'll see what happens with that. Either way, it feels very nice. It's quite thin. There really isn't any extra padding to it through the midfoot heel and across the top of the foot, but in the toe box and forefoot area, you'll notice this little bump right here. It almost looks like a crease. The crease isn't actually a crease, it's a little bit of additional padding that they've added on the inside liner in this area of the foot. So it's very thin. It definitely provides what I would describe as a barefoot feel, but it does have that little bit of added softness in this area of the foot, which I think feels quite nice. So it's not quite as pingy, I would say, as something like the Flyknit upper on the Mercurials, but if you're looking for something that feels super thin and light on feet, this upper definitely does that. And it's also pretty structurally sound, which is something that I'm always concerned about when you go with really thin textiles. It feels very stable on feet. The lockdown is quite good. The responsiveness along the sidewall of the boot definitely seems to be really nice. It's not mercurial responsiveness, so don't get me wrong there, but as a whole, it feels structurally sound without being overly stiff in any way. So in terms of break-in time and just general comfort out of the box, they feel really good in that regard. So I'm pretty happy with what they've done here, because I really feel like that's always been one of the downfalls of Puma's, I guess, speed boot line, especially all of the EvoSpeed models, where I felt like they were all decent, but the synthetic was always a little bit lacking in comparison to other options. That's not the case here, and as a whole, it just feels very unique. You also notice that the upper does feature a one-piece construction, where the central part of the upper is filled in with more of a standard kind of elasticated knit material that we're used to seeing on a lot of quote-unquote sock boots. Of course, that flows into a low-cut design where you do have a little bit of a kind of knitted edge to the sides of the ankle, as well as a little extension piece at the back. But you'll also notice that the lacing system is kind of unique in that the attachment points aren't actual lace holes. They're kind of lace loops, as we've seen on quite a few models in the past, not just from Puma, but it's unique in how it's done, where you can see it's these very fine individual strands of, I'm assuming, the same material that the upper is woven out of that create these lace loops. So they're very fine. They all kind of can separate when you press them with your finger, but together it creates, I'm assuming, something pretty strong. In terms of long-term durability of this, I guess it could be a little bit concerning, but there are a ton of these little threads. So the benefit of doing it this way is that because it's just individual little threads that are so thin, you're not really adding a lot of additional bulk to the surface of the foot, where if you were to compare this to something like an X16 or X17.1 from Adidas, which use nylon lace loops, I always felt like that just added a lot of extra material, both on the outside as well as on the inside of the boot, in the area where those nylon lace loops actually have to be attached to the upper. But you can see they've done a pretty clever design here where it seems to be all integrated as one piece to the woven textile upper. So it's an interesting way of doing things. It definitely creates a much flatter surface across the top of the foot, and still of course allows for a lacing system that runs deep enough to give you this nice and secure locked in fit. Internally, you're gonna find a synthetic suede heel liner with similar amounts of padding to current top and Puma football boots, and then the insole is fully removable, and it appears to be kind of the standard retail branding here, in that you can see it does say Puma Nano Grip technology, which I'm assuming, based on how this feels, is a slightly kind of silicone coated surface to the insole itself. So it's just that little bit of grippiness that does actually feel noticeable in terms of how it grabs your socks. Basically, the idea is just to eliminate any extra slipping inside of the boot, but the insole itself is very straightforward, being made out of this super lightweight white foam material. Which brings us to the sole plate and stud pattern, where I think Puma have done an excellent job designing this. You're gonna notice that it does have an external heel counter, which has kind of a standard rounded look along the sides, but a little bit of an extension lip at the very back, which I think is a cool little idea. Not only does it look good, but it does add a little bit of structure as well as adding some protection that otherwise wouldn't be there. And the plastic they've used is remarkably solid. It just feels nice and firm, not flimsy in any way at all. Kind of like you could describe some of the early F50 Adizero models and the plastic that they used. Either way, you'll notice on the base of the sole plate, there is a ton of kind of added structure by way of kind of this, I guess, I'm not sure what you would call this rigid design that you have running through the midfoot and heel area. So it is very, very stiff through this section, which is kind of what you want for a responsive sensation. And then in the forefoot, the plastic is thicker than I think you would expect it to be based on how it looks, but it's also got a tremendous amount of structure to it. And it's very, very responsive in terms of giving you that kind of fling back effect that I think a lot of people are looking for from a pair of speed boots. Certainly stiffer than any of the models currently on offer from the Puma brand, but I think it makes sense given the speed boot design that they've gone with here on what is supposed to be the upcoming speed boot from the Puma brand. You'll also notice the FGAG branding right there, which leads me to believe that this brand new stud pattern is usable on both firm natural grass as well as artificial grass surfaces. And as you can see, it's kind of Mercurial-esque in terms of having these forward-facing chevron bladed studs. It's also kind of Adidas-esque in terms of its layout, having 3 studs on either side of the forefoot, a support stud in the middle, and 4 bladed studs in the heel. So it's not unlike a lot of other options out there, but in terms of just outright grip, because of the shape of the studs as well as the length of the studs, not sure how that's going to fare on artificial grass unless it's fairly deep artificial grass. But as a whole, in terms of overall traction, it's much more aggressive than anything currently on offer from the Puma brand. And again, I think fitting for a speed boot. Now, obviously these are prototypes and they're not going to be releasing to the public, so there wouldn't be much of a reason to swap out the black laces, but I have done that anyways for some orange reflective ones because it matches the boots and looks cool. But I was also curious on how difficult it would be or easy it would be to swap the laces given this weird kind of little string lacing loop system that they've gone for. And I can confirm that it's not as easy to swap out as just a standard nylon lace loop. And I was a little bit worried about the individual strings maybe breaking as you tried to thread the laces through because it doesn't go through very cleanly, but it seemed to be fine. It just took a little bit of extra time. Either way, if you are interested in some SR4U laces for yourself, the website to go to is www.sr4ulaces.com. It's a great way of changing up the style of your boots in a very inexpensive way. If you're interested in some for yourself, there'll be a little pop-up on screen as well as a link down below in the description. On feet, the boots feel really nice. I would say from a fit perspective, it kind of compares more closely to the Future than it does the Puma 1 at this point in time, but the material of the upper does make it feel distinctively different than both of these boots, and the shape as a whole along with the material, they've done a good job of how it wraps your foot, and you would think it's one of those materials because it is so thin and kind of almost a little bit rigid to the touch that it would maybe be too stiff and there'd be a lot of creasing, but really they don't feel stiff on feet whatsoever. It wraps your foot very closely. There's pretty much no bulging at the side of the ankle, which is often the case with a lot of one-piece upper construction, so they've done a really good job there. The heel lockdown is quite good, and the little bit of extra padding they added to the liner in the toe box area is very noticeable once the boots are on feet. It takes away that extra volume, and the boots in general have a nice snug fit all the way through without feeling like they squeeze your feet. If you had to compare these to the X or the Mercurials, kind of the main competitors at the moment, these do fit and feel more like the X than they do Mercs, just for those that are wondering. From a width and volume perspective, they have some decent width, they have some decent volume, but still fit really nicely. I would say as long as you don't have super wide feet, these are gonna fit most people very, very comfortably. And then as far as sizing is concerned, I'm wearing these in my usual size 9.5 US, and the fit and the length seems to be perfect. So when they do come out, if they do come out, when you are looking to get a pair, I would recommend going true to size. So in conclusion, if this is the future of Puma speed boots, I think there's a lot to look forward to. And obviously they're not coming out for probably another month or two if I had to guess. But hypothetically, if these came out today, I think historically one of the major issues Puma has always had with the sales of their speed boots is they're always viewed as the third place option, and in most cases, rightfully so. But this time around, if they came out right now and you compared them to the Nike Mercurials and the Adidas X line, these are lighter than any of the current speed boots. The traction is super aggressive. They are very comfortable. The touch on the ball is great if you're looking for that thin barefoot speed boot type sensation. And assuming that this would stick with the same price points that Puma currently has with the One and the Future, it would also be the least expensive of the top end speed boots from the three big brands. So assuming that what comes out is the same as this, if not even slightly improved, I could see a lot of people jumping ship to Puma for the first time ever. Anyways, guys, that's it for this one. Hopefully you enjoyed the video. If you did, be sure to support it with a like. If you have any questions regarding anything about these boots or something that I talked about in this video, feel free to ask them down below in the comments and I'll do my best to get an answer out to you. If you aren't subscribed to the channel already, make sure you hit that subscribe button along with the little bell notification so you get notified when the next new video goes live. You can find all my social media information linked down below in the description as well. And other than that, guys, thank you so much for watching and we'll see you in the next one.